Today we're going to be talking about how to do the oil filter cooler in a 2008 Mazda Speed3. So first you want to start off by getting it jacked up into the air. Make sure you get a jack stand under there for safety. Afterwards you can proceed to get yourself underneath the car and locate your oil filter. There it is. That's the bottom of it, the housing. Once you've located your oil filter, before you remove it, you need to drain out your oil. And you're going to be draining your oil by releasing a drain plug at the back of your oil pan. Make sure you have some kind of catch can or any kind of container where you can catch that dirty oil. Once all your oil has drained out, we can take and put our drain plug back in. You don't want to be forgetting that for later. Feel free to even torque it down. Once that's all done, now we can remove the housing, the bottom part, for our oil filter. So to do that, you're going to take out this Allen key first. Once you take out that long bolt that goes through the actual oil filter and the cap on the bottom, now you can proceed to take off the actual housing. For this, I'm going to use an oil filter wrench. Now, no, the oil filter is going to drop out when you take it out, and so is some residual oil. So have your catch can ready so you don't make a mess like I did. Once we have the oil filter out, we can remove the coolant lines from the oil cooler. So here's the oil cooler. It's at the bottom, and you're going to have one clamp right there. Get some pliers on it, fight it off. It's probably going to be a little bit of a battle. Feed it back and forth, and that'll allow you to take the clamp off. When you take the hose off, know that you may have a lot of coolant that comes out. So on the instructional said it's going to be a drop. No, it gushed. I think the whole reservoir drained out. So again, have somewhere that you can drain it off below to help minimize the mess. As you see, I was poorly prepared. Once you've drained off any coolant, now we can proceed to take out the oil cooler sensor. It will be located on the housing. You could take the sensor out if the clip is accessible. A lot of times it's kind of stuck in there and hard to access. So another alternative is you can take out the whole sensor housing, which is what we're doing. Use a 24mm wrench. You get accessibility, you can crack it open, take it out and ready to clip it once you have it out of the oil cooler. This is what the sensor is actually going to look like in the housing, so you still want to take it out of the housing and clean it up afterwards. Now let's take a moment, because honestly, if you've made it this far, I want to congratulate you. It's not easy work. If the car is really 2008, it's probably going to be rusty, crusty, and quite a battle. So kudos that you persevered. You're about halfway there. Now you can move on to taking off the bolts from the oil cooler housing. There's going to be 4 bolts, 10mm each, 2 on the left side, 2 on the right side, and they're going to be connecting the oil cooler right to the engine block. Unfortunately, they're a little shrouded. I recommend getting an extension on your 10mm and some kind of breaker bar on the handle, a small extension there too. And afterwards, you may need to be getting in there and just trying to loosen them up best you can by hand. Once you start getting closer, you're going to feel the oil filter housing actually having some play in it. It'll be moving around. Once you remove the last bolt, you're going to see that it comes free. You'll notice that the filter housing does not drop out. It still has that second coolant line that's going to be more on the top side of it, keeping it in place. Now we're going to want to repeat the same steps. To get that hose off, you're going to get some pliers, adjustable pliers preferably, and we just want to feed that clamp off the hose and then slowly start to feed the hose off of the oil filter housing. Once you have the clamp off, the hose may not come off right away, because again, if it's been on there for 10 years or more, it's probably really cozy. So when you do try to get it off, just get the pliers on it lightly and try to wiggle it side to side, the actual hose, and try to take the hose off gently, because you will need to be reusing that when you put in your new oil filter housing. Big congratulations, you have now taken out the oil cooler. Compare your old one with your new one, so you make sure that everything matches up. The coolant lines are going in the same place, the housing bolts are in the same place. On the old filter, you're going to have a bolt going through the top of it that keeps the cooler connected to the rest of the housing. You want to take that out, clean off the housing. We're using brake clean because you're still going to reuse that. And now we're going to put on a new oil cooler. The new oil cooler is going to be metal. Unlike the old one, which was plastic and is prone to leaks, this one is solid metal and holds a lot better. Once we clean off the housing, we can now be seeking to combine it with the oil cooler. You're going to combine it the same way. You should probably even have a new bolt that goes through the oil cooler connected to the housing. It should be very easy to tell which way it goes. So you want to reinstall that, make it one unit. And now we're going to go backwards in our steps. So everything we did to remove it, we're going to do it in the opposite direction. We're going to connect the upper hose on the coolant, connect the 4 bolts at those 10 millimeters for the housing itself to connect it to the engine block. Lastly, you're going to plug in the sensor into the housing. Make sure you also put in the housing for the sensor into the whole oil filter cooler assembly. And then afterwards, you're going to be ready to just connect that last coolant hose. And then you put in a fresh filter on the bottom, close everything up, and make sure you fill it up with oil, because you would be surprised. At this point, I'm going to have to offer you my apologies because unfortunately I don't have the full footage for the install. Here the install is getting started, but the sun started to go down, it started to get dark, and me and my buddy needed to step on it to get the job done so he could drive the car home, which he did. Besides this, you don't see this going on, but we're also doing the control arms on it. So while I'm helping with the oil filter, or he's doing it most himself, we're also working on the control arms on either side. Reinstall it is going to be, again, the same steps, just going backwards. So right now, we're going to go hose, then connect the actual housing with the 4 bolts to the engine block. Afterwards, connect the clean sensor back into the housing for the sensor, and the sensor housing back until the oil filter and the oil filter housing assembly. Afterwards, you're going to put on the remaining coolant line, put in a fresh filter on the bottom, screw that cap nice and tight, fill her up with oil. For oil, you're going to want 5.8 quarts of 5W30. Some people put in 5W40. I leave that at your discretion. Manuals at 5W30. So when you do this job, this should resolve an oil leak that you're probably having coming out of the cooler. So when you check her up in a day or two, you really shouldn't be seeing any oil seeping down on the housing.